Hello, my name is Dr. David Edward-Ooi Poon, founder of the Faces of Advocacy, previously Advocacy for Family Reunification at the Canadian border. Today we have a very special guest, someone who's helped us tremendously during this campaign. We have MP Harris from St. John's East. We are so grateful for you to have you here today. For those who don't know, MP Harris wrote a fantastic letter on behalf of family reunification a few weeks ago, and we are here today with him standing as our champion. So welcome and thank you for your coming today.
Well, happy to be here, Dr. Poon, and I'm not normally called MP Harris, and I would rather have an informal relationship with you. I'm Jack, and I'm the Member of Parliament for St. John's East, but I'm also the Public Safety Critic for the NDP and Foreign Affairs Critic as well. So I do have some subject matter interest in these issues, as well as my own constituents who are concerned about this. And if it's okay with you, I'll call you Dr. Poon, or I can call you David, whichever you wish.
Jack, please call me David, and thank you again. Yes, and as the NDP critic for public safety and emergency preparedness, the first question I want to ask is, why is family reunification important to Canadians and to the constituents of St. John's East?
Well, you know, family reunification has been important from the beginning of this pandemic concerns, starting in the middle of March when we had the concerns being raised, the Parliament itself closed, the government started eventually urging Canadians to return. My own son was in Costa Rica on a study holiday, and we got him home early. I mean, families want to. We had people from all over the world, from my constituents, who coming from India, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Peru, Thailand, Spain, Morocco, Iran, Croatia, people on cruise ships and all of that, who wanted to be with their loved ones, and it's understandable that that would be the case. And we did a lot of work from the very beginning in assisting people with their travel arrangements, getting Global Affairs Canada on board, working with the Minister's office and the weekly meetings for most of the period in finding out what the latest information was. So it's been top of mind for, this whole issue has been top of mind for families since the beginning of this, and is still concerns for safety, and this is something we'll be talking about, is top of mind for Canadians now, as we are seeing across the country schools opening and other activities increasing, and concerns in some places raising, not lowering.
Actually, that discussion on safety is very important, and we thank you for standing for us for so long. So you fought for family reunification with your open letter a few weeks ago, since the beginning of the pandemic. So what made you take the stand for voting Canadians and their families?
Well, I think first of all, the government, and we didn't know at the beginning, and I say we, everybody in the country, and we still don't know how long this was going to be a crisis. Let's face it, we didn't know what the extent was. There was a lack of knowledge about transmission.
Yes.
There was a lot, and there still is some gaps in that from a medical point of view, and some debates. So there was uncertainty. And but the criterion used by the government was, in our view, unnecessarily narrow. So the issue of family reunification is tied to, and particularly in terms of spouses, we haven't gone further than that, but was tied to the definitions in the immigration field based on an actual legally married spouses or common law couples within that definition under the Immigration Act. And they also included dependent children.
Yes.
Well, that was the initial step, and that was until people were saying, hey, what about us? What about dependent children who have a mother or an adult child who wants to come visit because they're sick, or because they just want to join them, come back to Canada for whatever reasons, or come to Canada to be with their relative. That was something that became important pretty soon. Your group, or your previous group, since you've changed your name, but that part of it obviously was what we heard from constituents, what we heard from people like yourself and your members of your group. That's what motivated us to say, hey, something needs to be done. The government has to look at a more flexible process. We have to start recognizing that people in committed couples have, a claim to a process, to claim to be able to be together, and it's a serious implications for them, obviously, but also for their relatives in Canada, whether it be someone who's in a romantic relationship, or whether it be someone who has a relative who is in extreme medical circumstances. And we've had a number of them in my own, among my own constituents, people who've played a significant role in their care, for example. Or because their the care needs are getting extreme, they would want the help of a family member to be with them. That's
Mm.
extremely important, and has been, we've had to make significant advocacy efforts to allow these people to come.
It means a great deal for many of our members for you to say that it was our letters and our voice that helped you come
Oh yes,
with us.
very much so. And I know you personally have put a lot of time into this, and you're continuing to do so despite your profession as a medical doctor. And I think a lot of your people who are well, they're not your supporters. They are part of the same cause, and
Yes.
they're part of what needs to be done to get the attention of members of parliament, to get the attention of government. In the end, it's a government decision. It's not. It's all very well to say I'm a member of parliament. We can advocate as you were doing, and we can draw attention to this issue as I did. I wrote the Minister of Public Safety, Bill Blair, on the 28th of July, and I issued a
Mhm.
press release on the 12th of August. So we're still keeping up this issue. We have other members of Parliament of our caucus writing similar letters. Brian Massey has done so, I know. Jenny Kwan has written to the
Yes.
Minister of Immigration, talking particularly about some of the problems with respect to immigration. And there are lots of family reunification issues in immigration, as I'm sure you and
Yes. Team.
your group members
Yes.
really know well. And so some of the rules of the limited categories that are being considered affects that as well, and is delaying people from being together.
Yes, this is why you are a champion, because no matter how strong our advocacy movement is, the MPs speaking up for us means a great deal. Now, you've talked about the challenges adult children have with their parents, about the toll that committed couples have being apart. So could you speak about how family separation has affected mental health?
Well, mental health. I'm not a mental health expert. I'm a lawyer by profession, so I have to rely on what I hear and what I understand from people who do know. But obviously, we all know that couples who are in committed relationships, if we're talking about romantic relationships, obviously are suffer when they're apart. People who have had long distance relationships in the past are well aware of that, and want to be together and want to maintain these relationships if it's all possible to do so. Luckily, we're in an era where you and I who've never met can see each other and talk, and I think that recognize that it's good that there's a possibility of communication otherwise. But some people have serious reactions to this current situation. I know you've done an informal survey of some of your people who've written to or involved, and have people have self-disclosed higher rates of concern about mental health issues, whether it be I won't go into details, but I'm very
Mm,
familiar with some of the problems that people encounter and who are affected more badly by this than others. And I think that's an important consideration. I think compassion. There has to be some compassion
yes.
by our government in dealing with this, and we really do need to see the government move to try to have a process that goes beyond what we're talking about in terms of the categories so far. Why they haven't done that, I don't know. I haven't heard back from Mr. Blair yet. I
Mhm.
understand he had an open house recently, and the questions were raised, but we still don't have any answers from the government.
It means a lot to hear you talk about compassion, Jack. And I was wondering then, how do you see family reunification occurring safely in Canada?
Well, I think again, as I say, I'm not a medical professional either, but so we and in who are in government in one form or another as parliamentarians, we have to rely on the advice that's given by the leaders in the medical profession, by the public officials. But I think they do need some guidance in the sense of the hope for flexibility. We need to see uh, uh, we don't need to see rigid categories of entry. I think that's important. On the other hand, we also have to rely on them to say, well, how do we ensure that the public health is not endangered? Obviously, anybody coming into the country from another country poses some theoretical threat, but the rules, the rules for that, we have them there now. I don't see them changing drastically, but they should be examined to see whether they're adequate for all circumstances.
Mhm. And now you've done a lot of work and we've talked about the letter, but I was just hoping you could tell the people watching, because I want them to know why I'm so proud to have you here with us. What have you been doing? What are you currently doing to help bring your constituents and the Canadian families together safely?
Well, I think, you know, what we're doing is what members of parliament generally do. We assist our constituents. We've had recent cases in my own riding where family members who wanting to come here, needing to come here because their relative needs them, easing that process. We even had a case where a student who's not a Canadian citizen was being denied entry of her spouse. Without our intervention, she would not have been able, or he would not have been able to come here and join his spouse, who was a student and had a student visa, as did he, but they were denying entry. So you do the advocacy at the individual level when you're confronted with those cases. As in my role, I assist other MPs who are dealing with problems with Canadian Border Services. We do have a problem with Canadian Border Services, and I think I've seen you discuss that with some other MPs, and it was before House, which disappears.
Uh,
It's dead on the order paper. So, you know, that we have Canadian Border Services agents exercising a high degree of individual discretion without very much in the way of guidelines as to how they should exercise that and what they should be guided by. And so we have inconsistent decisions. We have no effective appeal from that. And so it does require individual advocacy by MPs with the minister. So, you know, all I can say to your adherents and your people you're advocating for is that we continue to work and hope to change the government by what you're doing now and by what you're doing on an ongoing basis. We're getting letters every day from people who are part of your group, letting us know the specific circumstances that they're facing and the desire for a process that's more inclusive and makes it more available, more possible for people to come. And I think the cumulative effect of that has to be positive. And I'm trying to give your group some hope that this is going to bring about some change. But it's been a long road, and I think one of the things that I pointed out to Minister Blair, which I'm sure your people are aware of, we're now 5 months into this in terms of the restrictions. But we, from the beginning, at the beginning, we didn't know how long it was going to be. We still don't, 5 months later, know how long this is going to be. But there has been plenty of time to have a good look at what the rules are, whether they can be changed slightly to make it more change the categories, to have a process that allows people outside of the restrictive groups admission to Canada for family reunification purposes, as you're talking about, and for assisting in circumstances that we've talked about. Now, a lot of them have made the news reports whereby
yes.
people who have wanted to come to visit a
My apologies, MP Harris. We're having a bit of an unstable connection right now. The last thing I heard you say was we've had some reports of a person who wants to come see someone who's ill. And I'm just waiting to see if it comes back in.
Poignant circumstances, and I think it gets all of our sympathy.
MP Harris, I don't know if you're able to hear, but I think we had a slight drop in the connection. The last thing I heard you say was about we've had a number of instances of people trying to come in to be with loved ones. And then, so that was probably about 30 seconds ago.
Well, I think people want to come in to visit with loved ones for all sorts of reasons. Obviously, the ones of the family reunification reasons,
Yes,
for the sake of being together because of the committed relationship that people have, and they're being denied an opportunity to be together. I think that's was the primary motivation for your group to start. But we've
absolutely.
seen as time went on, we've got adult children who are not dependent children who have a desire and a need really from a human a human compassion point of view, from a human nature point of view, to be with their loved ones at times of illness, or if someone has an impending death. People want us to be with their relatives at these difficult times, and that's something that we have to recognize. This goes beyond committed couples and dependent children. Let's face it. So that category really has to change, and there's no reason why that can't change quickly. It
Yes.
doesn't. It requires a decision. I mean, all of these rules that we're going by now are done by orders in council. Well,
Hmm.
orders in council are decisions that are made at a cabinet meeting,
Yes,
and those
yes,
cabinet meetings happen relatively frequently,
yes.
and they can be changed. I think the ministers and in the crown and the prime minister, these are the people who make these decisions, and the parliament has not been meeting. And there's no, in the absence of some extraordinary opportunity, there's not going to be very unlikely. There will not be a parliament until the 23rd of September.
Yes.
It seems to be impossible for that to happen. So, it's still in the hands of the cabinet, and the kind of advocacy you're carrying out should be taken into consideration.
I really appreciate two things you've said, Jack. One is that you talk about how our group has affected change, because that means the world to a lot of us. And just to hear you acknowledge us means a great deal. The second thing, and it leads into our last question, is I thank you for giving us a message of hope. So I would like you to know, what message do you have for families who feel alone, who feel kept apart due to the current travel restrictions?
Well, I think the message is that we need to continue to have hope, but we also need to convey to the cabinet and to the government that this is important because of the uncertainty that continues. I mean, people have put up with it now and have had negative consequences, but we don't need to continue this for an indefinite period, because right now we are dealing with indefinite futures. So let's do what we can as soon as we can, and keep up the advocacy for that, because if you don't, then it will go off the agenda, and people will start saying, "Oh well, those people are satisfied that with the status quo." Well, you're not, and you shouldn't. Be done as soon as possible.
I was hoping you could repeat the last two sentences you said. You could and you shouldn't, or something like that.
Well, I think, well, I think I said, well, I guess to reiterate my message is that uh, we've had a period of uncertainty, and people have endured that, but this uncertainty is going to continue into the future. But there's no reason that the difficulties that people have to continue indefinitely, because changes can be made and should be made by the government to ease the categories, enlarge the categories, and have a process to allow people to be able to come together.
That is incredibly well said. And I thank you so much. I wish you saw when your letter came out, how many of our members saw, oh, this is a great guy. We're so thankful. Like, it meant so much
Oh
and
well.
gave us so much strength.
Well, I
I,
appreciate that, and I appreciate that, David, and I'm glad to be able to be with you today.
I ask anyone watching today, those who feel alone, disenfranchised, and forgotten by the government, join us in the campaign at the facesofadvocacy.com. Facesofadvocacy.com. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and now YouTube at Faces of Advocacy. We are not asking for open borders. We are just asking to be together. Today, it was MP Jack Harris who is here from St. John's East, and we thank you for your time. We're leaving in 3, 2, 1.